A warm welcome to this event from the Africa Center for Religion and Society. I'd like to thank all of our participants who have joined us from all around the world, and particularly our distinguished panelists, who are all world leaders in the field of world Christianity. I am particularly grateful to all of you for accepting my invitation. Thank you all for taking your time out to be with us today. My name is Jaye Edu, and I'm the founder of the Africa Center for Religion and Society. Today's webinar explores the role and methods of missionary schools in advancing quality education and the development of Africa. In the British colonies, religious missions were instrumental in introducing European-style education. The Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts, the Moravian Mission, the Mission of Bremen, the Methodists, and the Roman Catholic missionaries all established themselves on the Gold Coast, Ghana, between 1820 and 1881. In Nigeria, Protestant missions were opened from 1860 to 1899, and the Roman Catholic missions entered afterwards and opened the first catechism, primary, secondary, and normal schools. In Zambia, the White Fathers and Jesuits and the London Missionary Society opened mission schools in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They set the pace for the schools most countries in Africa and the former colonies inherited. Nevertheless, the legacies of the missionaries have come under sustained attacks. The missionaries have been accused of serving as cultural imperialists who undermine the cultures of the colonized people. They have also been profiled as having aided the European colonial administrators in exploiting the colonized world. In much of the former colonies, mission schools are still graded as the best schools. And it is fair to say that most of the schools the post-independence leaders of the colonized world set up still do not match the quality standard left behind by the missionaries in the mission schools. African leaders and stakeholders need to explore critical aspects of mission education that will benefit the continent. And so in this webinar, we will discuss the state of education, and we'll highlight areas where the continent needs to reinvest in mission strategies in the running of schools. I'd like to welcome our exceptional panel. Reverend Dr. Professor Bayo Ruhanga, Professor of Systematic and Historical Theology, Uganda Christian University. Dr. Patricia Idoku from the University of Notre Dame in the USA. Professor Samuel Awa Nyamekie, Associate Professor of Religion and Environment from the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. And Reverend Professor Brendan P. Carmody, Society of Jesuits, who is formerly Professor of Religious Education at the University of Zambia. And then we have our moderator, Dr. Charles Prempeh. And so without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our moderator, Dr. Charles Prempeh, to kick us off.
Thank you so much, my brother Jair. This is an important introduction, and I'm very happy we have this program and such wonderful panelists to do justice to the subject we are discussing today, precisely because education is very critical and foundational to the civilization of every human society, to the extent that it is the vanguard against the collapse of society, and education is actually equalizer. So I want to thank all our panelists and those who have joined us this afternoon, this morning, this evening, wherever you are. We are very much grateful for your time. And I want to thank Professor Ewa Nyameche, whom I know from the University of Cape Coast, where I studied for my first degree. And I thank Professor Christopher. I was in Uganda for 3 years, Makerere. So yes. So I was there. That's why I started my PhD. I was there for 3 years at MISA. And then for the others, I've looked at your works, but unfortunately not personal encounters. But all the same, thank you so much. Now, the conversation, if it's just going to be conversation, so feel free to say as much as you know about the subject. The object in the long run is to be able to collate ideas, critical thoughts in terms of shaping and modeling education in Africa to advance human flourishing. So we'll look at it philosophically, sociologically, anthropologically, politically as well, to chart new pathways in terms of the extent and direction to which Africa should go. So thank you. At this point, I'll begin by just, I think, a very basic question, which would lead us into the conversation. I mean, what would you conceptualize as education? What would any of you conceptualize as education? I know this is quite basic, but of course, your responses will lead us into broader discussions. So any of you could kindly take that up.
For me,
yes,
education is nothing but anything that prepares human beings, a person, to fit into his community and be productive. Yes. It is today that people are talking about formal and informal. In those days, the emphasis was to prepare you to fit into your community, not necessarily being able to read and write.
All right, thank you so much. I don't know if Professor Patricia Idoko would want to say anything in addition or to reinforce or to express a contrary opinion with respect to contemporary understanding of education, because he made an important point in terms of the functionality. In other words, we don't learn for the sake of it. It shouldn't be for the sake of curiosity. If I'm not trying to say that's what you mean, but it should not be for the sake of something to tickle the mind. But instead, it should be productive, it should be functional, it should be geared towards human flourishing. I don't know whether there's any contribution to that, a contradiction or something. We are not here to debate that. I mean, just something to tickle us. Yeah, so Professor Patricia, if you want to say anything to it, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think I agree with him. Like what I have here in my paper, I started talking about traditional system of education. Like that's where every other form of education took their root. So what we had initially was that traditional form of education where kids are taught good manners, kids are taught how to respect people, how to be good citizens, and add value to their society. And at that point, education was like for everybody in the community. So anybody can educate a child. And so you grow up, your neighbors can be your teachers. So there was no any a kind of formal kind of system, but like anybody can educate the child, and the goal is to prepare the child to be a good person in the society. And I think today, when we are looking at education, that's one thing that we need to think about. Is education preparing us to be good citizens, or is just for the degree or the certificate?
Excellent. In fact, I decided to call you because I read part of it in your paper. So I wanted everybody to hear what you had to say to that. Excellent. Thank you so much. I think Professor Christopher wants to say something. Yes, let's hear from you.
Thank you so much. I agree with my two colleagues in their definition of this term education and where it should lead us. You see, in the African culture, it was a process by which one generation purposely transmitted culture to the young adults and the old for their social, cultural, and economic benefits, and for the benefit of the entire society. So the question of individualism was not there. It only came later on, where the knowledge which I have is not transferable to any other person. And that education was aiming at providing change in the behavioral patterns of individuals in society. And those changes were towards desirable ends as perceived by that particular society. But in the global village now, I'm not very sure how that one can work out. Yeah.
Excellent. I would want to give Professor Brenda Kamodi, who has been on the field working in Zambia all this while, to express his thought with respect to what has been said so far.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Yes, you are loud and clear.
No, I just wanted to be sure that I wasn't just talking to myself. I like the idea of human flourishing. That was mentioned. I think that's very important. But with that is the other point that's been made a number of times, and that is flourishing where? In other words, in what kind of society are we talking about? And that is, there are many kinds of societies today, including the one that's kind of become more central, and that's the world society. So you have to prepare people to live in local community, yes, of course, wherever that is, and also, though, to be able to have the skills to negotiate more widely in terms of the international global community.
All right. So thank you so much. I have a follow-up question to that. I think if I'm to summarize what you have all said, I think the critical point is the fact that education births the potential in the individual. And I would say that education brings about liberation, or it empowers. So that if we are to go by Francis Bacon popular saying that knowledge is power, then when everybody is educated, what it implies is that power is decentralized. And hierarchical society is deconstructed by virtue of knowledge. So obviously, education then will be a challenge to community, because community would imply authority, it will imply shared value. So imagine people being educated, empowered, and this time they can challenge authority, they can unearth their potential as individuals. Can we talk about community in a modern world, and how should that actually help in redefining and reconstructing education? Maybe to make my point clear, I'm very happy Father is here. If you look at the Protestant reform, the Reformation of the 16th century, there were many attempts before then, but the Prince media was very key because it decentralized knowledge. And when that happened, there was a rupture with European nations with the what they call so-called the Dark Ages. And so the nation states were born, human freedom, nationalism and all that, freedom of conscience. Now, this was because of education. So to what extent can the indigenous notion of education, which emphasizes gregariousness, group solidarity, and the idea of Ubuntu in the contemporary education scheme? Yeah, please, any of you could take that up.
Okay. Yeah, you see, as I first stated, that's where our problem started.
Okay.
And for Africans, we considered ourselves as one people. Every adult, normal adult, was a disciplinarian. When he finds children misbehaving in the street, he can even pull a stick or a cane and discipline those involved. And the parents will go back to the house and thank that adult that did that. Today, before you are aware, you don't do whatever, that's where they will take you to. You see the point? So now it is becoming only small group. That group solidarity, the Ubuntu, everyone for now it is each for himself. You see, each one for himself. Now compound houses, no more. Only yourself and your kids and another thing. So that's the beginning of. So that people think that it is for everybody. Some time ago, if people didn't know the source of your income, The society, they will just give you a full respect. They won't recognize you. Today, wherever you get your funds from, people wouldn't care and they will just be following you. It's only book knowledge. He understands English. He can speak French, good French. That's all. That's all that we know.
Yeah.
But knowledge, proper knowledge, is different from language. You get a point?
Yeah.
Yes. Back home, Osetutu didn't know how to write, but he founded Asante Nation. And look at what he has done for them. So until we change that notion that it is book knowledge that can help us, it becomes a problem. Now you can
Thank
go
you
to
so much.
a university. Yes.
May I contribute, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things the early missionaries left for us in terms of education is the idea of a holistic mission. They thought education was a community development project. So in that way, individuals are being developed for one another, for the community. So my going to school, my receiving education, I will understand it. It is for the improvement of my local community primarily, and then extended to, the society in general. Unlike today, education is seen as a personal heritage, what's supposed to help me become what I want to be, achieve my dreams, my vision, and all that. So if we look back that way and see how did they achieve that? Because when a child comes out of the community supports everything. Whatever anyone could contribute to help that child, it didn't matter whose family he or she came from. That has changed. But I think revisiting missionary education will enable schools maybe to begin to look at that once again. When a child is doing so well, is a star. Is it a star for him or herself, for his family, or can that be translated into the development of any closer society to that child?
Thank you so much. I think Professor Christopher Bayer, you want to make a comment, please?
I want to make a comment. Thank you very much, moderator. In my opinion, you are right to say that education empowers. But it appears that there is a disconnect between the African traditional education and what we are having now. For instance, one day I was invited to go and attend a wedding, an introduction ceremony for someone who wanted to wed. Lo and behold, there was this student of mine who was doing a Bachelor of Divinity. But one of those students, when you set examination, they set their own questions and answer them in the way they want. So this is a guy I consider to be really of no substance at all. Now, when we went there, the man was so knowledgeable in our culture. And I looked, with all my degrees and so on, I looked out of place. I was educated in this modern education, and I'm having this one who was educated in the other kind of traditional way of doing things. Now, in Uganda, for one to stand for a political post, presidency, member of parliament, or something like that, the minimum education is ordinary, A level, advanced level. However much knowledgeable you are, if you don't have that one, you cannot. So there is this kind of disconnect between the empowerment which we had in African traditional society and what we are having. As my colleague said, what we have is ours, and it helps me to forge my way out in society.
Right.
And for those of us who have been educated from outside Africa, when we come back, it really is a hassle to fit in society.
Right.
That's why we have, for example, this Oxford Center for Religion and Public Policy, to make sure that people are educated in their own contexts. They are not moved away from where they are, so that they can fit in that society. So even in our way of looking at education, how it can help us to develop in Africa, we need to come up with a model which will make us move and which will help us not to continue being slaves of our brothers and sisters, the former masters.
All right, thank you so much. Please, any comment from
just a small aid to the missionary education.
All right.
In fact, a lot of explanations or theories. Some believe that whether, in fact, the coming into the continent by the Europeans was a genuine one, whether they indeed came to evangelize or Christianize the African, or it was used as a stepping stone to colonize us and then plunder our resources. But when you look at it, you will see that some of the strategies they did, for instance, the president, the Salem system they used, you will be annihilated completely from your society. Even they said your own name is demonized and it has to be exorcised and giving you Christian name or a European name.
Yeah.
For instance, a name like Cynthia in a means a child of a snake. When you take Cynthia to the church, the pastor will bless it nicely. Take a word there, they will say it is demonized. So it has to be exorcised. It's just like when people say that our forefathers, Africa is suffering because of idol worshiping and the crimes and other things. I said, anybody who says it, I would disagree with that person completely. Because the supposed people of God, the Israelites, how many were killed? 6 million of them were killed by the Germans. Go to Germany today. It was Germany that their trains, they fly in the air. Go and see what is happening.
Yeah,
and come to Africa.
All right. Prof, thank you so much. So I think we are entering into the realm of another round of conversation, but I want us to exhaust what we started. So we'll come to where Prof began. But before we jump there, Prof, thank you so much for initiating that, but I want us to go back a bit. So I think right now, the issue has to do with the sense of community that informed the content and the context of indigenous education system. And I did say that is if you look at the world today, we have become more individualistic, and especially in the world of social media, you know, which has reduced human beings from social to virtual beings. To the point that the mystique, you see, because when we talk about the older generation passing on knowledge, it implied that they must possess that knowledge. You know, that knowledge might not necessarily be esoteric, but it should be a knowledge that the youth will need for survival. Correct. It is clear that the modern world, with the democratization of knowledge, has deconstructed the mystique around the older generation to the point that for some of them have to learn from the younger generation. You know, we almost live at a time where the older generation now have to seek knowledge from the younger ones. So obviously, you know, the wheels have turned to the point that we can't more or less cry over spilled milk. So what do we do? You see, I think that's the crux of the question. You see, what then becomes of education? How do we revitalize it in such a way that it is able to accommodate two worlds, the world of the past, the world of today, and perhaps the world of the futures? Because as it stands, it appears, you know, the grounds for Ubuntuism is gradually fading and dying, you know. So how then should we structure education in such a way that a bit of community is re-infused into the system to be able to engender the idea of the common good, so that education will have a functional effect?
Okay.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think that's a very important question that we really need to reflect on. Because like you rightly stated, we can't continue to cry over spilled milk. But what can we do at this point? And from my little knowledge, I know that missionary education has always been context specific. So how can each region or each country look at the needs in their community and somehow build that, work that into the education system? For example, Nigeria. Nigeria has been going through a lot of conflict with Christians and Muslims.
Yes.
And when you take a close look at the mission schools and the textbooks that are used, nothing is said about the conflict. So how can mission schools help in their society to like bring about peace? So what is the need of each community?
Right.
And I am talking about Nigeria because I'm from Nigeria.
Right.
And right now, what is at stake is peace. And we don't find any of these things in our textbooks.
Right.
You don't find a mission school talking about Islam. And in Islamic textbook, you don't hear them talking about Christianity in a positive way. So if education liberates, if education is power, how can we use this tool to build the society?
Right.
Okay.
All right.
Can I continue?
So,
Can I
yes,
continue with
Professor
that?
Antoinette, yes.
Thank you, moderator. I was just thinking as Dr. Patricia was speaking that, you know, the new educational narrative should include serious questioning of educational content and assumptions. There are facts that people are being, pushed down people's throats. There are, rights and privileges that education is not really espousing as much as it should. Children from privileged homes, they need to question how their families got to where they are in Africa and how they can use their positions to influence the flourishing of other people around them, other children that are not as privileged as they are, you know, to be able to answer together with everyone, Christian or Muslim, poor or rich, the questions that are begging for answers in Africa. Peace is one of them. Solidarity with the marginalized is one of them. Corruption and its practices is another aspect. So all these are questions that education should enable the young people to begin to answer together. They may not find a solution in their generation and time, but at least they would have contributed positively to building communities and societies, because that is what Africa is known for. We are known for communities. So our educational system must begin to question educational content on a very serious level.
Thank you. Professor Kamadi, would you want to, give a comment on this, please?
I much of what's being said is very helpful and very interesting. And particularly, I think maybe the question of power. But what I'm missing from this is, although people are touching the context with the society, let us remember that the missionaries were not really their own bosses. They were working within a society and a cultural system that they had to work with. And that is still true, even more true today. The control of the education is no longer in the mission, usually, mostly, and in my experience, it's gone over to a different group altogether. It's gone to government. So the missionary today has well, maybe not a very different task, but it is a task, is to negotiate how it's going to work, how they're going to work with governments.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Can I come in?
Yes, Prof. Yeah, Professor Wanyamiche, please come in.
Yes. Yes. You see, God in his own wisdom gave each group how they should see him. If you lose yours, that's the end of you. Africans, we've thrown away our system. Whatever we went for is also good, yet we are not following it. Anything that is African, we have demonized it. Remember, today, our problem in terms of security is environment.
Mm-hmm.
Africans are capable of managing environmental issues more than the whites. The problems may be the same, but you can't use the same solutions to solve them. This is a case where they have demonized the traditional system of managing environment, and now we've thrown everything away. Religion and moral education. In fact, morality is now going down. But in Ghana, two of our major reforms, they remove religion and moral education from the curriculum. Today, it's not even examinable. The country is destroying. When immediately after elections, it is either the Quran or the Bible that is used for our people to swear in. Immediately after swearing in, the story is completely different. And what can help us to put morality into our case, we've thrown them out. So now, the best thing we can do is, obviously, some of our cultural practices cannot survive today. So we have to overhaul them and see those that I think can fit now and combine with the modern ways of doing things for us to survive. Other than that, we are fighting a losing battle.
Yeah, all right. So thank you so much. I mean, if I'm to summarize what you just said, it's almost like polishing the pearls of ancient wisdom to push through the modern world. But again, as I said, you see, if you take the question of corruption, poverty, and the rich child having a sense of empathy or sympathy for the poor child, you know, let me use the word for the enriched against the impoverished. I think that would make better sense because nobody is born poor, nobody is born rich. So the enriched child and the impoverished child, clearly there's a gap, you see, because there's a gap in terms of how do I identify with the unlike, the one who doesn't look like me. So it is not just, again, in fact, let me broaden the conversation. It is not just also about the poor, the impoverished, and then the enriched. But it goes beyond that to talk about ethnicity, which is becoming a big issue, which actually feeds into conflict in Africa. It also incorporates religious plurality, how the continent of Africa, which is deeply plural in terms of religion, could have different religious traditions cohering in, you know, in a common environment. Then there's also the racial dimension, right? To what extent can education be refashioned in such a way that we appreciate the other without having the sense of anti-racist racism of a sort or anti-ethnic ethnicism or ethnocentrism? So in this sense, in what did the missionaries succeed in that, in terms of bridging ethnic gaps, in terms of bridging racial gaps, in fact, in terms of bridging social gaps? So Professor Wanyamicha was talking about the Salem system. I want us to problematize it a bit. At what period in mission work was that introduced? And did that survive for long? If not, why? And why was it introduced, right? You know, because, in fact, as he mentioned the Basel missionary, they introduced what called the Calvinistic ethics among the Kriapem. In what ways did, for example, the Protestant Calvinistic ethic actually shape the lives of the people of Ikropon, you know, at the time? So I want us to look at it, you know, was there any philosophical foundation to missionary education that brought about unity, that brought people together or divided people? Now, if there are some nuggets that can be picked from that, how do we put that into contemporary education? If not, what do we do going forward in terms of plurality, dealing with plurality in Africa, which brings about conflict, corruption, and poverty?
Can I come in?
Yes, please.
I think, moderator, Africa has so many problems. At times they are real, and times they are just cooked up. You see, imagined by the outside world. To the extent that when I'm outside Africa and I turn on the TV, what comes from Africa is only negative, as if people are really in a boiling pot and they are soon to die. Now, what we need to do, in my opinion, in our education system is to instill this pride in who we are, because God did not make a mistake in creating me an African.
Yes.
No. We need to have that pride in ourselves, beginning with us. And also to know that actually we who have families, children, and so on, there is something which we can contribute towards the pacification of Africa. And I'm sure if we were to develop the pumpkin model, whereby the pumpkin will meander all over, but at the same time, eventually come back to the center. And we are in control of our situation, I think things will be better. But what we see now is, once I have this education, I must be a star and then suppress all these others. And yet in our former education, we were told to observe, to imitate, and also to ask explanation from the elders. But what I have observed, at least in Uganda here, is that parents give up as soon as children go to university. And when the children are in the university, say, thank God, now we are as free as the bird in the air. But when things become sour, they come back home and say, Daddy, Mommy, what is this? When things are too late. So my take on this is that we need to be proud of who we are. Even our education system, I know there is something which we have produced from the African point of view, and which we can contribute favorably to the outside world. I always wonder, I had my education in the United States.
Yes.
And my thinking was that Africans actually cannot compete favorably with these non-Africans. When I went there, it was the reverse. Now, is it because I was drinking water from America and I had ceased to drink water from Africa? What happened eventually? What I believe is that most of us can compete favorably with our brothers and sisters in the outside world. And then, when the missionaries introduced this kind of education, for instance, in Uganda, they made sure that there are certain tribes which are privileged. In Uganda, the central and the western part was encouraged to go to school, have a pen. The northern part and the eastern part were encouraged to go to military. And for us, we had a pen, the other ones had a gun, and that has been the problem. Surely, is that our problem? It is a problem which was created. But if we were
so Prof,
yes.
I mean, a question before you continue, because I think we need to interrogate a few issues. So was it a matter of because I remember Professor Kamadin talks about the fact that missionaries were working under their bosses.
Correct.
So was it a colonial policy that fused with the missionary agenda, or it was simply the missionary decision not to go to the northern part of the Uganda? So for example, in the case of Nigeria, I know there was a deliberate colonial policy to stop the missionaries from entering into northern Nigeria. I know, again, in the case of Ghana, where I come from, there was the same policy. And the reason was very pragmatic, right, in terms of supporting the colonial agenda, so that the understanding then was that those who had come into touch with missionary education became, as it were, civilized. I'm using that word called seriously. And they wouldn't do the kind of labor job that the colonial governments wanted.
Correct.
So I want to know how the Ugandan contest was about.
You see, that was the colonial agenda.
Yes.
And remember, at the beginning, where the flag followed the Bible, things were better. It is only when the Bible started following the flag. You see, that's when now they were to dance the tune of the colonialists. But if colonialism had not stepped in, I think the missionaries would have followed what they were supposed to do.
Exactly.
See?
Yeah, because the point is also that, so that's why we need to, I wanted us to be critical with that, because at some point there was tension, especially in late colonial era, right?
Correct.
There was tension between the missionaries and the colonial governors.
Yes.
To the point that, for example, in the case of the Gold Coast, some of them were arrested, some of the missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, Andreas Rees, for example, he wouldn't hoist the flag of the Danish government, so had to be arrested and then kept in detention. So see, that is why I want us to look at the challenges that embroiled even mission work and education at the time in late colonial period in Africa. So I don't know if any of the panelists has a contribution, and then I'll move on with a question based on what you've all said in terms of secularization of knowledge. I'll come to that, but if there's any other contribution.
Yes, thank you, dear moderator. I think that the partition of Africa in terms of government was also the plan in terms of evangelization. And of course, education was an addendum to that plan. So if the Irish were given, for instance, Eastern Nigeria, maybe the Portuguese were given Western Nigeria, and then like that. So it wasn't an honest, clear-cut plan to just come and educate the people. You know, there were other agenda. I mean, some other hidden whatever motives we can't talk about right now. But what happened was that if the group that came to a certain aspect of the country now discovered that these people can really, you know, achieve a lot, then perhaps they left part of the agenda and then decided to do more for them. Let's take, for instance, a lot of Westerners and Easterners in Nigeria are highly educated people. You know, take them anywhere, they can do anything. Maybe when the missionaries came, they just wanted to get a little workforce.
Missionaries don't like her.
Anyway, I think she'll come back. Professor Brad Kamode, did you want to say something?
No, I was only saying that I had lost her.
All right, all right. So yeah, Professor Opara, please, if you still want to continue, go ahead, please.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, excellent. Yes.
Okay, sorry about the interruption.
No, it's fine. It's technology, yes.
Yeah, so with that division and that partition, each group now decided, this is my territory, whatever I like, I did with it, you know. By the time they discovered maybe the Westerners, these are brilliant people, Easterners, they can study as much as they want, then they had no choice than to allow that to keep happening till today. Education booms in the West and in the South and in the East, you know, unlike in the North. So that impact is still there till today. The current mission needs to see what it can do to change that, because education is power. Nelson Mandela said it. That's the greatest weapon you can use to change the attitude and the notion of a people. Is through education.
Right. So thank you so much. I think so far I'm very happy about your last point. So 3 things. I'm putting 3 things together, or weaving 3 things together. 1, the fact that there should be community. 2, the fact that education should, you know, serve as developing a moral conscience, which should be shared. And then 3, the fact that education should be built on a certain absolute foundations or principles. Right. Let's look at the philosophical foundation of modern education, especially the university.
Yeah, please, Prof.
Yes.
Prof, before you come down,
yes,
one of our problems,
yes,
leadership, our leaders, those who are leading us. So upon all this, most of them went to Europe and America to study. And you know the plan they have built for us already. So they cannot change. Every year they will go AU meeting, they will go chop, and then come, and the story is the same. They don't want to change. You see, they could have led us somewhere else. That please, we are Africans. Let us come together. You see, it's the same currency for West Africa. Have you seen what has happened?
Yeah, there you go. It has now been moved forever to about 7-8 years. Anyway, so Prof, thank you so much for that intervention. But again, it comes back to the point I was talking about, the fact that education, for it to impact that kind of...
Come to that, we need to do something. It will be the same. Government will come, government will go, and the story will be still the same.
All right. All right, thank you so much. So 1, I was listing 3 things that education should be able to engender. 1, the fact that there should be community, because the human being by nature is communally oriented being. So that regardless of how we see ourselves as individuals, we still need the other to survive. Two, education should be built on a certain absolute foundations that should not be more or less questioned, more or less. You see, I'm using more or less in a context. And then three, education should also bring about not necessarily uniformity, but we should be able to live together around certain shared principles. All right. But if, I mean, this will be true of missionary education, it will be true of indigenous education, perhaps it will be true of even medieval education in the Western world. It will be true of, let's say, Cambridge and Oxford. You know, it will be true with the so-called Ivy universities in the US, where, again, missionaries were in charge or the churches were involved in the schools. Right. In all of this, I think the cardinal point was the God factor, the theocentrism, the fact that God was considered absolute, and out of him knowledge sprang. So if you look at education today, two things are very key. One, doubt. So virtually every student who goes to university is told doubt. You have to doubt. You see, there's no certainty, right? And you don't just have to doubt. Why do you have to doubt? Because God has been kicked out. You see, once God is kicked out, everything now becomes a matter of doubting. All right. And so historically, this was from the 17th century when knowledge was secularized. So Immanuel Kant and all that. Then in the Enlightenment era, we saw that kind of, again, secularizing knowledge bouncing back, and it became a big deal, especially in the 1960s. Meanwhile, as I said, missionary education had God as a center. So, for example, you can talk about the human dignity, as Professor Christopher talked about. That is a human dignity. Now, you can talk about human dignity only if you believe human being is created. And that means there should be God. So if there's no God, how do you define human dignity? If there's no God, how do I accept that the non-ethnic order is also a human being? If the human being is simply a dog that has been elevated, if simply a God, then how do we treat the human being in ways that benefit society? So I want us to think critically about the centrality of the divine in terms of education. So Professor, when I'm talking about the absence of RME in Ghana, I have had challenge with it because people felt it was not deep enough, and the content sometimes you find the God factor missing. So what can we do? Because the missionaries had a God center, the God factor in the mission education. So the fear of God was there and the respect for human rights and things like that. How do we refashion some of these things, as I've mentioned, in understanding contemporary education in Africa?
Okay, let me say what we just did in Nigeria.
Yes.
When the issue of exclusion of
with the divine factor.
Hello?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yes.
When the issue of exclusion of Christian religious education came up in the curriculum and the scheme of work of Nigerian secondary schools, the church fought a serious battle with the government. And eventually the government listened. So right now, we have Christian religious education as its own subject, unlike before when they had superimposed it, and it was like just an addition, a little bit of an addition into what they called national values education. So now we can choose the Christian textbooks that we want for Christian religious studies and ensure that the Christian ethics and teachings are actually well represented in those books. It took a lot, both from the bishops, the Catholic bishops and the CAN Association and the Christian teachers and all of that, for us to get government to accept that this should happen. So I believe that some of these things take time, and it takes individuals who are passionate about seeing that the right thing is done for our people, our children especially, to have it done. So Africa has a long way to go, but I think a step at a time can get us there.
Right, thank you. Professor Wanyamicha, you wanted to say something, please. Could you?
Yes, please, yes. With the divine thing, you see?
Yes.
Just ideological.
Yes.
In Europe, the issue of God is now being played down.
Yes.
Yet, they recognize human beings. If you misbehave towards your other human beings, there are laws to deal with you.
Yes.
You get a point? Yes. So why can't we do the same here?
Okay.
In Africa, before the Europeans came, if you take life as abortion, they will even exorcise you from the community. Because they said, even those who are at the cemetery, they want their numbers. How much more those who are living?
Yeah.
In Ghana now, we can have people on television telling you how you can get rich fast. quick money, Chicago, whatever, and then NCA, whatever, they are just there looking at unconcerned. Primary school children are now owing Rolls Royce and other, and nobody is talking.
Yes.
You see the point? So that's why I said everything boils down to leadership. Until we're able to question the source of people's money. As a professor, yes, they know how much you take. Then they cross-check against your burden. What is the difference? If a SS boy is in a Land Cruiser, and before the laws can check. I quite remember a colleague from here went to the US and bought 2 cars and paid for. Every year they follow him to Ghana to come and check. When I had scholarship and went to UK, I was given £2,000 cash. Anywhere, any shop that I went to buy something and I pulled the 50, they were just looking at me. So the system itself is important. And for God, Africans' understanding of God is even deeper than most Christians. I'm telling you,
yes,
deeper. You are moralist.
Can I come in?
Look at what is happening now. Only collecting money. Christ gave everything to us. Now you have to go and consult. You pay consultation fee before you go to church.
Right.
You see the point? So it's a systemic problem. Our leaders have to sit down and then come out to deal with the miscreants in society, and we'll move forward.
All right. So thank you. In fact, I will pick on the leadership issue in our next discussion. But Professor Idoko, you want to say something, please?
Yes, I wanted to add that I like the idea of the confessional approach in missionary school. And I think it's important to have God as the center. But I think we should also begin to look at the society in which we live now, because it's no longer about just Christianity. There are other religions around us. And so how do we prepare our students to relate with people who are different from them? The whole focus on otherness. For me, I think that should be very, very important. Otherness. How do I deal with people who are different from me?
Yes.
Because I might be deeply religious and I don't care about the other person. It still boils down to nothing. But how can we begin now to prepare our students to know that there are people who are different from them are also very important. Then secondly, the pedagogy that are used in schools is also very, very important. Like, how do we push our students to critical thinking skills instead of dumping things on them or helping them to memorize things? How do we build their critical thinking skills that they can positively challenge things that are going respectfully? Instead of you memorize 3 pages of papers and you go write the exam and you pass. So I think these 2 things, we need to pay attention to them. What styles do we use to teach our students? Very, very important.
Excellent, excellent. Now, Professor Kamodi, your hand was up. Could you come in before Professor Christopher?
That's fine. Thank you. I agree with a lot of what's being said, but I think there is an underlying problem. And really the problem is this, that I'll be generalizing here a little bit. Africa has chosen a Western system of schooling. And that Western system of schooling at the moment tends to exclude God and will exclude God. So you have a system of schooling that you have to deal with. And you've chosen it as a people. When some people say, well, we love the tradition and everything, you do, I'm sure. But when I was in Zambia, I remember that the African studies, I can't remember what it was, African tradition or whatever, they had one course and they were always struggling to get people to take it because they were all running for English, science, mathematics, you name it. That's it.
Yes.
All right.
Can I
So,
go?
yeah, Christopher. Yes, Christopher.
We don't
Yes.
recognize ourselves.
Yeah.
Now,
So, Christopher. Yes.
I like the way Patricia put it. How do we, since we are in situations where we have different religions, how do we go about it? Definitely, we need to have something on our hands to make sure that we also influence, for example, the Muslims. And even ourselves, Christians in different denominations. How do we go about it? I wrote a book on how to go about that one. The history and theology of the ecumenical movement in East Africa. And also, this is kicking out of the Bible out of our schools. That's a very serious problem, which we must address. And the way we address it, in my opinion, is to have highly educated people like us now talking about these issues. I thank the organizer. Actually, this is a very good forum, which should not stop here but continue. And I'm sure we shall have good fruits.
Yes.
Now, once you have highly educated Christians, they will know what they are talking about from an informed point of view. Sometime back, I was teaching how to teach Christian religious education in schools. And I found out that even Makerere, our first university in Uganda, did not have a book like this one. See? So I came up with this book, and it came out just last year.
Okay. Congratulations.
In schools.
Yeah.
Now, Uganda, we realized that there was a problem with our universities. Therefore, we came up with Christian-based universities, and one of them is Uganda Christian University. And I can tell you, there are wonders which are being performed by this university, to the extent that everyone who comes to study at Uganda Christian University has to take Old Testament, New Testament, worldviews, Christian ethics, and pass them. There is no question about that.
Right.
The government wanted to block us from teaching such a things which they consider to be just for priests and nuns. We said no, we have to be Christian in practice.
Right.
And the government had to accept.
Right.
As we talk now, we are in the lockdown, but this is the only university which is carrying out, for example, e-learning. And with, as far as critical thinking is concerned, we said that for every subject unit at master's and PhD, the coursework should be 60%. And this other one of rehearsing what the professor put across is 40%. We struggled with National Council for Higher Education, and they were saying, no. It should be less than that. We said no. We stood our feet. Up to now, 60, because we believe that you should have critical thinking when you are at a postgraduate level, as compared to the undergraduate level or high school. So that's how we have gone about it.
Right. You see, so these are important comments. So I would like to welcome Reverend Ebenezer Edu. So he's the headmaster of Infansopim, one of the best secondary schools in Ghana. Even though I didn't go there, I went to WAS, but it's one of the best secondary schools, I must admit. So let me say that, so from what you've all said, pedagogy, andragogy, and all that, I am tempted to now question the extent to which secondary schools, mission secondary schools, have been perceived to be hostile to the religious order. Currently, there's almost tension in Ghana. Wesley girls, a Muslim young woman wanted to fast, and the school's rule says no student, regardless of a religious orientation, should fast. And it generated tension in Achimota, which is not a missionary school, but also had a touch of mission, culturalization also said they wouldn't allow 2 young men with dreadlocks who are actually Rastafarians into the school. You see, they were admitted, but on condition that they cut off the dreadlocks. It generated tension until eventually it went to court. The court ruled in favor of the young men. As I speak, the school is seeking to call for an appeal. So gradually, we are seeing the resurgence in religion, which began in the late 1970s. And of course, in Africa, in the late 80s and 90s, surging back in our schools. So schools are becoming ideological backgrounds, as our president said. And I don't know what can be said about it. So again, it goes back to the pedagogy that Professor Idoko talked about. To what extent do we ensure that our mission schools do not become an extension of the churches? Because you see, that was the orientation of missionary. So the schools were also extension of the churches. Now, how do we ensure criticality in the study of both the Bible, the Quran, or any religious text? I studied Islam, of course, not at the senior high school level, but from first degree, master's, and I've studied Islam through and through. And I've studied Christianity as well. Unfortunately, it's hard to say this, but even at the university, the way Islam is taught, I don't think it's critical enough. I know I'm being politically incorrect, but I mean, at the end of the day, we want answers to the situation or what we are burdened with. I recall going to the lecture theater to write that Jesus could not have been the Jewish Messiah. And I had prayed to this same Jesus before going to write the exams. I had to write that possibly the rest didn't happen and all that. So at the end of the day, I think the fear that one will lose one's faith if faith is approached with that lenses of criticality, of course, which began in the 19th century in the Western world. So how do we, I want us to think through how the classroom doesn't become an ideological background, ideological, front. And also, we don't train students who become fundamentalists, or extremists in terms of belief, because we've talked about unity, inclusivity. How do we go about it? So I'll give Reverend Ebenezer, who has Infancy Payment. I'm very sure he's been thinking about what is happening in Wesley Girls and other schools. So, Rev, could you share your thought with us in terms of plurality in our schools, religious plurality in our schools?
Well, hello, good afternoon to you all.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, let me first apologize for coming late because something locked me up at the original education office. I had to meet the original director and other people for an issue that couldn't permit me leave them at the time that we're supposed to start this webinar. So I'm sorry about that.
Right.
Well, I'm glad you have raised this issue of religion becoming an issue in Ghana as we speak in our various secondary schools. You see, I didn't join you earlier, but in as much as we try not to let our religious ideologies take hold of all those who go in there, I also think that there is a reason for the missions establishing such schools, such that if you don't guard against certain things, you become any other secular school. And that will make it impossible for us to achieve the very reasons for which the schools were established. Yes, indeed, we allow anybody at all to attend mission schools. We don't segregate that because you are a Muslim or you are that, you can't attend our schools. It's open to all. But the issue is that if you're not careful, you allow others with different beliefs to also enter these schools and end up turning things upside down, such that the morality you want to encourage will become something else altogether. You just mentioned the issue of Rastafarianism at Achimota School, that became an issue. You see, what about tomorrow another person comes? I'm also a traditional priest. I want to come with bare feet. I want to come with that shirt. What happened to that one? The school is a leveler. That we begin to allow everybody to express themselves in a manner not to disrupt our teaching and learning. That's our core business. So I think that we should be careful. Just as we are trying to inculcate morality in our students all over the place. The way some religions are also trying to get hold on some schools, we need to be very careful about that. We are not saying that if you come to, let's say, a Methodist school, you can no longer go and practice your religion elsewhere. But the issue is that, assuming we have assembly, we should all be there. Yeah. We're supposed to go to class. And you come and tell me that, oh, my religion tells me that at this time I should do ABC. How will you control the student body? How will all the students be at a point to do whatever we want them to do? So yes, we agree. But I also think that we should, even go to government, for example, we should be careful how to set rules in these schools so as not to downplay the morality that we are trying to address. That will end up letting the students flourish when they come up. So it's an issue that we are having in Ghana that ought to be handled very carefully before we make these top schools. Within my school, Wesley Girls, these are top schools that are making the country proud every year. Yes. People we are turning out there are people who are now in positions in the country and even outside the country. It's because of the training we gave them, because of the level that we give them. So if you allow other religions to say, this is, well, secular place, so we can also practice our faith, that's where we need to be careful. So I think that we should be careful in handling these issues.
All right, so I'm very happy. I think Sister Antoinette is at the senior high school level, and then of course, Reverend Ebenezer. So let me ask this. I think, and fortunately, I think all of you are educationists. So this is my question. Yeah. With respect to religion in our secondary schools or senior high schools, is it not about time we clearly defined the boundaries of who a student is and who a people is? Now, I'm trying to bring out this distinction because a people is expected to be a minor. Yeah. A student is supposed to be a major. So, for example, when you go to the university, you are entitled to the lifestyle you want to live, provided it doesn't violate the rights of another student, because you are considered a mature person to live on your own, to take personal responsibility for the decisions you take in life. Yeah. At a senior high level, I think you are still a minor. So I think the tension now is, I think, is not the child per se. I must be very honest. I think the tension has to do with the parent.
Exactly.
All right. So the parent seeking to impose, a certain practice on the child, and that since it becomes an infringement on the child's right to education. So I see tension, right? So the tension between the parent and the school, not the child, because as the child, he's a minor. So if my father had told me, Prempe, you couldn't, let's say, smoke marijuana once you go to school, it means I can't smoke. And with the school says I can't smoke. Now, if my father says I can smoke and the school says no, and I have to go to school, my father needs to be talked to because I need to be empowered by my education. So what is your take on this? Minor, major, people, student, and the politics of religion in our secondary schools? I know this is a very sensitive issue, but I want us as academics, as scholars, as educationists, to pick it from that perspective so that we don't embroil ourselves in conflict, which may be needless as far as these children's right to education is concerned.
Thank you, moderator. You nailed the problem on the head. And why do I say so? Let me give you an example. In our schools, we decide, okay, at a certain stage, you cannot grow your hair and make your hair if you're a girl. And boys, you have a certain level of haircut you need to come to school with so that you look decent and tidy all the time. Now it is time to resume, and the mother says to the child, hey, student, let's go, you get your hair ready. And the girl says, no, I like it the way it is now. Let's just go like that. And the mother accepts and brings the child that way to school. Then you get to school, the school says, no, this student cannot come in at this time looking this way. Then there is a problem. So you said it, the tension we keep experiencing right now is because of parents' understanding of the rights of minors and the rights of adults. Because the children grow bigger today, they are bigger, they are more experienced, they know more things because of the internet and all that. So even parents treat them like adults. Treat them like adults, but the age of an adult and that of a minor and the liberties that are accrued to each person, they are different. So that's one of the biggest challenges we're having now.
Yeah, so let me complexify the question a bit so that I'm very happy about what you've said. So I recall when we started, the question was the moral foundation, the moral nurturing. Okay, so I said that is critical in education. You see, somebody posted the question, we should invest in science and technological education, but I'll come to that. But here is the thing. Morality is solid at the basis of every child. I remember in Uganda, one proverb I learned it was that if you want to burn a tree, burn it when it is so young, not when it grows. So I think there's a certain logic to why a minor needs to succumb to authority. You see, there's a certain logic to it. Because I remember when I was finishing my PhD and my supervisor asked me, Prempe, what would you lose most? And I said, I fear I'll be responsible in life. Because now for the first time, I'll write my own essay and I'll be responsible for the words I use. But as a PhD student, my supervisor will correct it. No, this one, change it. So my fear was the independence I was going to get. But thank God the foundation had been given me so I could build on that. So imagine a minor who hasn't got that moral foundation because of a certain ideological battles of parents. How would this child fit into society? Because you see, when you grow, you are responsible. You should have had a foundation that will guide you as an adult. So I want us to look at it very critically. And unfortunately, I have followed the debate. People, it doesn't matter who determines morality, who determines neatness, who determines hairstyle. I think, I'm sorry, but it's a banal type of argument. I think I'm becoming more involved. But I think the idea is that minors should be trained at minors so that they're prepared for adult. When they grow and they want to move away from it, it's the choice they have to make, but not when they are minors. So I don't know what the panelists want to say to that. I think Professor Christopher wanted to say something.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think the whole issue is on the family background. So the church should not run away from influencing, first of all, the family life. And I remember at Uganda Christian University, especially during graduation, children and their parents want to come, especially ladies want to come in skippe kind of clothes. We stop them at the gate, period.
Exactly.
We tell you this is not the way it is done, whether you are a minister or what, this is our university, period. And I think with our Christian universities, I mean schools, we need to be careful with the way we are handling, because these are our nursery beds for our church. And if we miss out that, then we are in trouble. We should come up with core values so that even a Muslim would want to bring his or her child to that school because of what it is. I have seen this one in Uganda, whereby people take children to certain schools with all the regulations which are somehow oppressive because of the kind of morality, the exercise there, the kind of education, the teachers. For instance, why should I take my child to a university or a school where there is sexual harassment, not from the students themselves, but from the teachers? Now, where I teach here, should a student raise a finger, we are always on the side of the student first. We shall tell you, leave our university, and then we battle it out, either in courts of law or outside the law. So we need to make sure that our schools are really marketable.
Yes.
So that.
I think, Prof, I think that the complexity here is that we are not talking about Christian university. We are talking about secondary schools, which have been secularized at independence. You see, and you could read a bit of political machination, even in terms of how so most of the church feel dispossessed. They feel that one, their source of income is gone. Two, they were left with virtually no choice to hand over the school, but to hand over the school to the government. And yet they still feel that they are losing out, so that even if they don't want to use the school for evangelism purposes, they think the kind of ethical values they want to invest in these minors. Again, my word is minors. You see, they think that, so how do we address secondary schools in a secular, public sphere in Africa today?
Actually, in Uganda, it is different.
Okay.
Although the schools were handed over to government,
yes,
the church as a foundation has power. For example, the Ministry of Education cannot post a headmaster or headmistress in a school without the blessing of the bishop.
Okay.
Or the priest in that area. You see? And there is a certain number of a percentage of people from the church who are on the board of governors. So our situation is different.
Yeah, I think I will understand the political context of Uganda because of the political regime there compared to, let's say, Ghana, which is very liberalized. Now, Professor Idoko, do you want to contribute to the conversation?
Yes, I was going to say that this issue is more complex.
It is.
Than we can imagine. Especially when you are the majority, it's easy to say, this is the way we want to do it. And oftentimes we don't think about the minority. I grew up as a minority Christian in a Muslim community. And the Muslims will also want to instill their moral code or what they understood as morality on the minority Christians, to the extent that we had to change our names if you have a Christian name, because it cannot fit into the Muslim name.
Yeah.
So supposing you are a minority in a Muslim majority community, and the majority Muslim community want to do exactly what the Christian majority community want to do because they don't want to lose that confessional approach. In Zamfara, there was a young man that I taught and I encouraged him to go to secondary school. He was the first person to be able to go to secondary school in his family. The last term of his education, he was killed in the classroom. He was stabbed by a Muslim boy in the classroom because of the different views they have about Jesus. So when we are talking from a majority point of view, I think we also want to consider Christians who are minority in the Muslim community.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah, so Prof, you see, so you mentioned two things. Professor Wanyamechi, I'll come to you. I know you're interested in this subject, so I'll come to you quickly. But I want us to think through what Professor Idoko just said. So let's look at it this way. So somebody discussing theology as opposed to morality. So obviously discussing the deity of Jesus Christ and the prophethood of Jesus Christ moves into the realm of theology, which unfortunately comes up in some religious communities. That one, it is true. But then I think the emphasis here is morality. So we are looking at, for example, if you take Muslims and Christians in Ghana, or even Muslims, Christians, and indigenous religions in Ghana, they all agree against. In fact, very interestingly, just I think a few weeks ago, the national spokesperson of the chief imam and then one leader of, I think, the SU were on television condemning homosexuality because there's a point of convergence in terms of morality or sex ethics. Right? Now, and yet, these same religions, when it comes to now defining theological doctrines and dogmas, you see that they diverge. So my point is, where can we find a point of confluence in terms of moral training of a minor? You see, I insist on a minor. So for example, if Islam stretches, let's say, respect for authority, Christianity does the same, so that we should be able to separate a bit of the cultic aspect of the religion from the morality, so that you don't force, for example, a Muslim child to go and pray in the church, and you don't force the Christian child to go and pray in the mosque. You see, at that point, we lose the track in terms of the moral boundaries. So that's what I want us to, again, focus the conversation. So Professor Wanyamechi, I would want you to hear, I want to hear you on this. Hello, Prof. All right, so would anyone want to come in? Professor Kamodin, or yes?
Yeah, even though some people think that the RME textbook in Ghana is not deep, but I would think is a place to start from.
Right.
You know, because what it does is that it introduces students to the traditional Islamic religious point of view. So I feel, even though something that is not deep, but it's a place to start with.
Right.
You know, just like walk students into, like, if you're talking about God, how do traditionalists understand God? How does Islam understand God, and Christianity? So I do think maybe it could be a place to start. You know?
Thank you. Excellent.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
just to add to all that has been said, religion, Africans are religious people, ordinarily. You know, before Christianity came to us, before Islam came to us, we worshipped God, whatever we call that God. So there are moral values associated with worship. Worship of deity. Now, when we come to schools and we think of morality, I think we should be able to agree on what makes for good living, good relationships, proper upbringing of children. You don't have to belong to a Christian community or Muslim community to agree on things like that. I go back to the moderator. I think it is theological ideas. That's where we differ. Yeah. And theological ideas relate to the concept of God that a particular sect have. So if we don't raise such issues with minors, because they wouldn't even understand those theologies, you know? Yeah, so let's just base our education on getting them to be the children that God has created them to be, whatever God that is. You know, we adults understand how society can function better. You mentioned the issue of respect. We think about being truthful, you know, hard work, you know, all those common backgrounds. There are commonalities that children across the world can grow on, step on, and become, you know, better citizens, better people who love each other without having to quarrel. And I want to go back to Dr. Patricia's mention of the other, you know, considering the other. I also believe that the church needs to look at that carefully. And what do I mean by that? Now, even in Nigeria, other religions are coming up. We are not just Christian or Muslim now. There are others. Hindus are here. All other religions, they are really emerging. And young people are attracted to these emerging religions. Yes. I don't know for what reason. They are no longer that traditional in terms of religion. So we need to let them understand how that affects the society they live in, and what they can take from those religions, and not just be you know, brainwashed into anything. Perhaps, oh, if you go to this school, if you join this religion, we'll train you free, you get every help you need financially and otherwise. That's not enough, you know, to believe in a certain ideology. So that's the aspect I think we need to also bring into our schools, to let them be open to the other emerging things that can happen to them as they grow up in terms of religion.
Right. Thank you very much. So, Reverend Ebenezer, yes.
Yes. I think there is something wrong fundamentally. I will begin from the home. You see, I believe that some religions and their leaders feel insecure to the extent that they think that, oh, if I allow my boy or my girl to be in this school for this short period, I don't put something in place, he may leave my religion and join another religion. That's why I have a problem with it. Students come to school, at most 3-4 months, you vacate, you go back home. So if from the home, as a parent, your religion, you've really educated your son or your daughter, he or she understands where you're coming from, I don't believe that the boy or girl being in school for 3 months will be enough to let him leave your religion to another religion. If that happens, then it means there's something wrong. Because they don't stay in school forever. If I have trained my son, he believes in my religion, at home we do things together, this is where we are going. And for 2 or 3 months, he's in the setup. That will not even allow him to practice what we are doing in the house. That should not be a problem. But I'm afraid that, oh, if I don't let him continue, I will lose him. That is what is happening, that some parents have become agitated. I believe that if they really are confident, they've trained their boys, and for this minor age, as you put it, you want them to continue to be with you, then don't have to be afraid. that you lose him. Is it that?
I think. Yeah, thank you so much. So you've made a very good point, which I think we need to reflect on a bit. So again, parenting and schooling, where do we draw the lines? You see, because so far, what we see is family values, which obviously for many of us Africans is religious values, is making incursion in the schools.
Yes.
All right. So the school, again, is not historically the extension of the church, but it's becoming the extension of family religions and family values. You see, in an environment where those they are expected to be minors. So, I mean, what is it about the family and schooling? Where do we draw the boundaries? So, for example, we have PTA, right? How is PTA important in schools administration? So that we don't end up standing or flying with one wing, giving more consideration to the minority group. And when, in fact, the school environment then becomes complex to manage, especially with minors. And then let's rope in internationalization, where you have religions not just in various countries in Africa, but influences from across the world, so that Africa also becomes the hive of religious tensions around the world. How do we engage all this? Because when I was in school, I'm a young man, I'll be 39 next month. But when I was in school in the late 80s and early 90s, we didn't know religion. In fact, as children, all the way to GSS, we didn't know Jesus as God, Muhammad as prophet. All we knew was that you are Muslim, and we didn't even know that we were playing together. But now, children appears to be radicalized very early. So what is happening? Internationalization, globalization, parenting, and schools. How do we negotiate these complexes or these complex terrains?
Yeah. I think I can come in now.
Okay.
Can I?
Yes, please. Please come in.
Yes. You see, first of all, the second cycle shouldn't be an extension of the religious communities.
All right.
Yes, they are not seminaries. The seminaries are where you go and do convert. But the emphasis should be on moral training.
Yes.
And allow each of them to practice the religion that is practiced in the house.
Okay.
To practice in the house. Yes, because we live in a pluralistic society.
Yes.
Recently, I was asked to go and review a very important university curriculum.
Okay.
When I went, African religion 2, Islam 3, the rest Christianity. All the department of whole Christianity. So already we are dividing it right from there.
Yeah.
Yes, we shouldn't do that.
Now, Prof, I have an interest there. Prof, you see, you've raised a very critical point, okay? To what extent are the other religions diversified enough to incorporate changes in the world? So, for example, could Islamic scholars, Christian scholars, Christian academics, Islamic academics, are they creative enough to say, well, we are having Islam and artificial intelligence as a course? We have Christianity.
Let me tell you something.
Yes.
You see, in Ghana, any lecturer that teaches in the religious studies department, you are either called imam or a pastor or so and so. In Europe, it is not like that. Where I was trained, it was only my supervisor who was a pastor.
Yes.
Yes, the rest, they are scholars that have learned Greek, Hebrew, whatever. So they present the religion as they are, comparative religion.
Yes.
Here, if a Muslim is presenting Christianity, you know how you go about it. If a Christian is presenting Islamic studies, you know how the person will go about it. The African religion is completely out. Meanwhile, it is the West, the attributes that the traditional people used to praise God. That is what we Christians have taken. Meanwhile, we condemn them that they don't even know God.
Yeah,
if you
so
like,
Prof, I'm interested in that. But you see, I know the argument, but my point is, it's also about creativity. Yeah. So look at, I know your supervisor. I met him, you see, but the point is that if you go to, let's say, Cambridge, or if you go to Oxford, if you go to Leeds, you notice that religious courses reflect contemporary development.
Correct.
So, for example, there's religion and climate change. There's religion and let's say, but in the case of Ghana, you see, so I think
we don't have that in Ghana. We don't have that in Ghana. Training of pastors, that's what even in the university.
Yeah, so in that case, I don't think it is just the university per se, as it is about the extent to which we are, we are willing to be creative with the courses. So
it's the curriculum, yes, the way we do things.
So you notice that we all want our comfort zone. You see, that's a challenge. So I don't think it is necessarily maybe the school, but you see, we want our comfort zones, and we don't want to go into uncharted path. I think that's where the challenge lies, because there are a lot of programs. Look, like I mentioned, somebody can teach spirituality and artificial intelligence, religion in an age of social media, right? Somebody can take religion and let's say climate change. Somebody can take, let's say, religion and African unity. You see, so it could be Islam and racism in Africa, Islam and so I think there's a lack of creativity that is creating
in the curriculum. Yes, the courses that we design and send to National Accreditation Board. That's our problem. Yes, we are not being creative enough.
Yes.
Those who work in the universities in Africa, they understand the connection between courses approval and finance. Courses that bring in funding are the first to be considered and approved. All those creative courses, for instance, maybe even with the issues we have in Africa with security and things like that, maybe something could have come up with society and insecurity challenges with special reference to, whatever. Migration of either herdsmen and things like that. But if you introduce a course like that, let's say in the university where I'm chancellor, how many students will I get even in 10 years? So that course will not be lucrative. It will not bring in funding. The university will spend so much. So courses that are creative, that can solve problems in Africa,
we are going to suffer. At the end of it all, we are going to suffer.
So that's why it's not flying in Africa.
I think Professor Christopher, I'll come to you, but I think that excuse is a bit weak. You know why? I started African Studies as the second batch of the program when it was first introduced as an undergraduate program at the University of Cape Coast in 2004. That was when I started, and it was not a common course. It was not even known among students. You see, people thought African Studies was just singing and drumming and all that, but today, virtually everybody wants to read. Look, I came to Cape. I'm giving different lectures. Why? Because whereas everybody will be quoting Foucault, I'll be quoting something different, which is uniquely African.
Correct.
You see, so I think again, it's about the creativity, it's about the will, because I don't think any leader would object to, let's say, religion and climate change. I doubt whether a leader would do that.
Let me tell you, that is my area, and I travel a lot.
Yes.
At almost free, take it. Yes. I just go and give lectures.
Yes.
These are some of the things. Yes.
Exactly. So just a quick example. Just a month, 2 weeks ago, the University of Cape Town reached out to me. They are doing some concept of Palabassos. So they reached out to me to look at Palabassos. And I said, okay, I'll look at Palabassos and religious plurality. So I look at that concept of Palabassos as soup, which is a potpourri of different meats, and I try to infuse in inclusivity. So I think it's about the creativity that we are not willing to.
That we are lacking. That is it.
Anyway, Professor Christopher, you wanted to speak.
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, our discussion is trying to scratch my brains. And I'm also looking at what happens to our pupils and students in primary schools, in secondary schools. How do we make them morally sound and they are not influenced by outside winds and so on? Is there a way Africa Center for Religion and Society get more time to discuss this issue and even to suggest a curriculum which can tackle things concerning family values, cultural values, public values, especially to our minors?
Yes.
Because what happens at home what happens in society is also reflected in our schools. See? So we need to come up with something, and I'm hoping that Africa Center for Religion and Society will have an influence on what takes place, especially in African schools and universities.
All right, so thank you. At this point, I would like to read some of the comments and questions we've had. There's one coming from Reverend Sister Ebele Onochi. I'm very sorry if I mispronounce your name. Kindly forgive me. So she asked a question: how can we make church services, mass, Bible studies, etc., interesting enough to catch the younger generation? I mean, to attract the younger generation. And then she asked a comment: we seem to be too rigid and unchanging in certain ways of doing things. Hence, we fail to see how the young see, thereby estranging them. When they hear anything church, they are disinterested. One needs to be interested enough in a course before following it through. This generation is not interested in church things and activities. Hence, it is difficult to get them to imbibe the values which our churches are trying to impart through schools. How can we make the employees in our various institutions of learning be so committed that they can die for the sake of imparting knowledge? Sometimes the wages are nothing to write home about. Hence, the employees grumble a lot, especially as they try to compare what we teach and what we do. We teach justice, fairness, but we pay low wages. Of course, so then she has the second one. When we pay low wages and the employees are not sustained by their salaries, they get themselves engaged in other things and neglect the student peoples entrusted to their care by the missionaries who lead the institutions. How can human flourishing be advanced in institutions like this? Our education is supposed to be holistic, but where the employees are not happy working with and for us, there is little we can do to achieve our goal. The whole mindset on how Christian missionary education should be approached needs some kind of overhauling, keeping in mind how to attract the present generation and to have our employees committed to the work project. So this is coming from Sister Ebele Onochi. I'm very sorry again for mispronouncing your name, if indeed I did mispronounce it. Any comment from, please, panelists to the comment, please?
Well, let me attempt reacting to the first question. Yes. That is how to make our church services, Bible studies attractive and all of that. You see, in most of the Orthodox churches, I'm a Methodist minister. Yes. And the other ones, they lack creativity, innovation, the packaging of the message. You see, the youth of today have their own way of understanding things, going about things. But if you, the leader, for example, of a Bible study or a church service, if you just look at your age and how you do things and how you say things to conduct the service, you bore them. You look boring, one of the youngsters. Okay. So it's high time we think about how do we present the message to the youth of today? The form, the packaging, how to present it to them. If you don't do that and you want to go our own way, I have a church nearby who says in our local language, for us, we don't do things like that. You talk today, the way you're doing things, no, let's understand these young ones. A place that I visited said, oh, it's not good at all to use the phone and the tablets and the church services and all that. But hey, wait a minute. The Bible and code, they are on it. So if the youth is comfortable using the Bible on the phone, what's wrong with that? But in some cases, they will bar them. No, don't do that. And these are things that will put the youth off. All right. So I think we need to be liberal and look at the best method of engaging these young ones. You see, those days you may think that, oh, the young ones don't know anything. But hey, this time around, what is in secondary school, university, they know a lot. They've read a lot. So if you, the leader, for example, don't understand them well and to let them move along with you, they won't come again the next time because you're boring. So what I suggest is that we need to look at our audience, our congregation, and try to suit them by way of presenting our messages the way they will appreciate it, the way to attract them, how they will leave you and go away.
Excellent.
They were leaving the churches, but now, if you modify the methods, you will have them. Give
Excellent.
them the ability to also do something. And now you go.
Excellent. Brilliant submission. Professor Christopher, would you want to comment on wages and salaries?
Oh, yeah. But let me begin with that, the young leaving our churches.
Okay.
But also the old are leaving our churches.
Yes.
For us, we realized that there are sections of society which need to be reached.
Okay.
And we started this course called a master's program, Masters in Divinity,
okay,
whereby we have professionals who want to serve their Lord, to preach the gospel from a theologically informed point of view. They come study, and then either they are ordained, or those who don't want to be ordained, they just, but they have training so that they don't begin preaching from an informed point of view.
Okay.
Now, with the salaries, this is a very tricky thing, because how do you, for example, retain a PhD holder in your institution? How do you attract a professor from a certain university, like Makerere, to come and teach at Uganda Christian University? As actually we do, we attract so many of them from there. Now the answer is simple. Make sure that your salaries are competitive. If government is paying 20 million shillings to a professor, you also pay the same.
Okay.
And then have other fringe benefits. Teach less, do a lot of work. Like in our institution, professors head research projects which are funded by the university.
Okay.
And the university, as we speak, is funding 3 projects. Okay. And each one of them is 150 million Uganda shillings. Yeah. And that is a lot of money.
It is.
See?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So that's how you do it. Send them for sabbatical. Send them for
yeah. So, Prof, how do you raise the money? As a private institution, how do you raise the money? Because government may be able to do that from state resources. In a private institution, now, so the government institutions may be able to raise money to fund public investment. What about private investors?
No. Government institutions, at times the money is misused.
Yes.
We really have money.
Okay.
The only thing is to make sure that you have people who are not swindling it.
Okay.
Yeah, as simple as that.
Okay.
You raise money from research, you raise money from donors. So outside there is money.
Okay.
If you want to, we get students, for example, from Nigeria, and they pay as international students. Students from Ghana, students from all over Africa, and they pay as international students.
All right.
You see the point?
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you so much.
I'd like to contribute to that, moderator.
Okay.
Yes, I would just like to say, with the Nigerian situation,
yes,
unless government partners with the mission,
yes,
mission schools will continue to pay the basic wages. Why do I say that? Because ordinarily people are of the view that mission schools are expensive. And they are expensive because the school is trying to, get maintenance in place, make sure that all the resources you need for academic purposes are there. The only thing that staff benefit from maybe is fringe benefits. If not, their salaries are really not that much. But when government takes to funding the schools, that subsidy kind of schools that the missionary system enjoyed, if government funds the schools, then the missionaries can run the schools, manage the funds well, then everybody will receive the same pay, whether they are in a mission school or they're in a government setting. I think the government needs to hear this call. It's been going on for a long time that they need to get into subsidizing education of every child in the country.
All right.
That's what happens in certain countries.
Yeah, so thank you so much. The discussion now points to the conclusion. So I'll give 1 minute. Maybe, God willing, we'll have this conversation again another time, as Professor Christopher keeps mentioning. So the question now is the state. If the state is developed, welfare system is strong, I don't think the schools or the churches will struggle that much. In what ways then can mission education actually contribute to national development? Maybe 1 minute each, then we wrap it up. In what ways can mission education or the church schools or mission schools actually contribute to the development agenda, the socio-economic development agenda of Africa, so that in total there'll be human flourishing.
Okay. Can I start?
Yes, please.
Yes, you see, for instance, in Ghana, the mission schools, actually, all the good schools in Ghana, you can see, started by the mission schools. So obviously, they are the paid setters. Setters. Yes. So obviously, now things have changed a bit. So they should re-engineer the way they do things and partnership with government so beautifully that at least they can continue to render the services they have been rendering since time immemorial. I think that will help us. Rather than,
Prof, add this to it. In what ways, because the missions, the churches want to have a stronghold on the schools. What will you suggest? What will you say to that?
You see, the point is that you cannot have your eat your cake and have it.
Yes.
It should become a compromise. Because once the government is paying the teachers obviously, yes, you meet the government halfway. There are certain things at least you must be able, but the core issue is that make sure the morality and then the Christian belief that you want to inculcate to the people, you do that. Rather than going forward, some are saying that, oh, even if somebody qualifies and can do the work better, oh, he is not a Presbyterian, we will not allow the person to head. All such things, we must at least limit it.
All right, thank you. So I'm very sorry, I'm moving according to how I see my important panelists on my screen. So I'll move to Professor Idoko to give me your final comments in terms of mission schools and national socioeconomic development.
Thank you very much. I think I want to draw my idea from the Catholic document called Nostra Aetate, and it talks about two important things, self-understanding. And it covers most of the things that we've talked about. So when we form our students in a way that they have a good self-understanding, this whole thing about fear and insecurity will be taken care of.
Sure.
And then the second thing is the understanding of the others. Like sometimes we don't even take time to even know what the other person is all about.
Okay.
All we know is that the person is different from me, so there's no. So I think mission school can borrow from Nostra Aetate to help form our students in the way that they will be comfortable in their skin. So that when they are exposed to other things, they will still be rooted in their faith. So that's one area that we can look at. It's good to be confessional. It's good to continue to evangelize, but also in a way that they can go outside their skin and still be comfortable.
Thank you so much. Reverend Ebenezer Edu, could you please give us your final comment on the question, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. What I have to say is that government and religious bodies should all understand that we are working together so that we bring up our children to be morally upright in the near future.
All right.
We shouldn't see it as if we are in competition with each other. So that if it's about morality, let the church or the religious body make sure that they take care of the morality of the boys. Not that because you are paying teachers out there, you will want to always interfere with even the good practices put in place to ensure that these ones grow up to become responsible citizens. I believe that if you target raising people who can be useful to the economy, it's better than trying to be in competition with each other. So for all the religious groups, various religions, let us all accept that we are seeking to bring up our children to be morally upright and not to just wean them for our religions. That may not help us. That's how come we have many churches in the country, yet immorality is an ascendancy.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, this reminds me of Professor Kwame Jechi, Ghanaian professor who died a few years ago. He said corruption is a moral challenge, not an institutional challenge.
Yes,
So I think this is a food for thought for all of us to reflect on. So Professor Christopher, yes, let's get your take, please.
2 or 3 things. One, we should have clear core values which promote moral uprightness in our schools, and also ask the government to make it easier for church schools to carry out their mission. And then have relevant programs with a Christian touch in our schools.
Right.
And lastly, be innovative in the way of retaining students and highly educated staff.
Thank you so much. Sister Antoinette, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I have mentioned before partnership with the government.
Yes.
I know that is very key. Then the second aspect is lobbying policymakers. We have Catholic professionals, even those who are in the corridors of government. When they increase budgetary allocation to education, does that really equate to improvement? So we need to get them to translate their increments to actions, proper actions for all the children. And finally, to say again that, Christian or mission education has the light. We are for the good of our people. Right. It's not about Western education. It is not about the Bible. It's about getting them to learn the basic things that make them human and God's children. So whatever we can do to make that happen for every child, irrespective of religion, ethnicity, or nationality, let's continue to do it. Thank you.
Excellent. I think based on this, next time we'll do something on religion and education and the human person in the modern world. All right, so Professor Brendan, please, let's get your final thoughts, please.
Yeah, I would say from what I've heard is that the mission school in Africa, as in Europe, it's probably one of the most urgent concerns would be to review their religious education, ensuring that it was not indoctrinatory, but respecting the freedom of each person, Muslim, Hindu, Catholic, whoever.
Thank you. So as I said, we hope to have another event on the human person, education, and religion. There's now debate about who is man or who is human being. With the rise of existentialism, post-structuralism, postmodernism, we know that the human person is no more an essence. So we would want to know how religion and education could come to a point of convergence to help us appreciate the human person, because issues of human rights and all that comes out of that. At this point, I want to hand over to my brother Jai to give us the closing remarks, and if there are any announcement, I'm very sure he will do that.
The conclusion from all our panelists was just fantastic, and I just want to say thank you to all of you for your wonderful contributions, to Dr. Patricia Idoku, to Reverend Professor Brendan Carmody, to Reverend Ebenezer Edu, to Reverend Dr. Professor Christopher Bayuranga, Sister Antoinette Opara, and Reverend Professor Uwa Nyamechi. Thank you so much for your contributions. I think we've gone very deep into a very wide range of issues surrounding mission education. And I also want to thank our audience from all around the world. Thank you for joining us. And I hope that in some way we've contributed to a deeper understanding of the issues. And as Charles says, we will revisit some of these issues at another time. So it just remains for me to say thank you and all the best, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.